Welcome to How's Your ePresence? I'm Mark Galvin, your host and founder of ePresence. If you are a returning listener, thanks for being here. We're always grateful to have folks return to hear a little bit more about what's going on social media. Here on How's Your ePresence, we talk about social media. Today's episode is our news update. This is our quick 10-minute broadcast that hits current events in social media. As always, joining me for the news update is our Director of Social Media, Eric Welch. Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
Good. Yeah, we're coming off of the holidays. How were the holidays for you?
It's good to be past the holidays.
They were a little bit of strain there, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's good to get back into a routine.
I love that.
But the holidays are always fun.
Well, I know you've got a couple. You've got some kids running around the house, and so you were probably busy.
Yes.
Trying to corral them. You're probably glad that school's back in session, right?
It's true. It's true.
Very good. Well, thanks for being here. Let's get right into this. Folks, listen, we want you to remember you can rate us on any podcast channel, especially in iTunes. Send us your thoughts and feedback to my handle on Twitter at ePresenceMG. That's ePresence, M for Mark, G for Galvin. And ePresence is spelled ePresence. And then rate us on iTunes. We'd love to get some data and help us reach more people. What's going on in the news this year or right now? Here we are. We're in the beginning of January, and a lot of you may have heard about this, that as of January the 1st, California rolled out the California Consumer Privacy Act. So here's the story with this. In this act, anyone that makes, or any company that makes more than $25 million in revenue or access to personal information of 50,000 people or more must be in compliance with this act. And so what that means is you need to make sure you are giving folks an opportunity to let you know whether they want you to share their content or not. Eric, what's important with this new act?
I think the goal of it is to make online life for folks out there more transparent, so that when they sign up or they submit their information to whatever the site is or whatever whatever they're doing, that they don't have to be fearful that their information is going to be sold or handed out all over the place. The goal is to make the consumer feel more safe when they're online.
And this is an interesting thing, because here we are in business and we are targeting clients. We help our clients reach a target audience. We know that on a lot of social media, you can target people very specifically. And I think what's happened, and I kind of get this, if I don't want my data sold, I would like to be able to, I'd like to know that it's protected. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with this, because number one, I like the idea that there's extra privacy, but at the same time, I do kind of lament that we're not going to be able to provide as targeted, the ads are not going to be able to targeted ultimately long term. How is an organization that's trying to figure out how to target very specific people manage through this long term? What are your thoughts about that?
I think the most important thing is just to make sure they're compliant so that they don't get in trouble. And then, that's the first priority. Excuse me. Once we get past that, then there'll be other ways and other research ways that you can find out more information about your consumer, about your audience in a way that doesn't make them feel unprotected.
Right.
I think a lot of that is evolving, especially with this new law just happening. But I think it'll be a short amount of time before there'll be new methods that'll be safer and also insightful for the businesses.
And there's a lot of times where I land on a website and I say, yes, I'm interested in getting information from this company. If you're opting in like that as a consumer, well, that's a good thing, because you're interested in those products or the information those folks are sharing. What you want to know is that information being shared with other people? And if they are, then you're going to be very interested in knowing that you've limited that. So that's the interesting thing as a consumer. But, folks, organizations that are out there, this is what you need to do. You need to build your own audience and continue to build that audience. And I think that will be the way that you get around you. Before we move on to the next topic, any other ideas there? Any other thoughts on that, Eric?
No, I think just kind of off of what you just said, it brings up a good point where you can opt in. The consumer can opt in if they want to get more information, and that's going to help the consumer, and which in turn helps the business, because they're deciding that they want they are actively deciding they want information from your company, and that's going to help you because that becomes your target. You're not going to discourage a consumer by visiting a website or by starting to go down the path of ordering something, and then 5 minutes later you get pop-up and you change your mind. Then 5 minutes later you're getting pop-up ads or whatever about that company that you are not interested in, and that just discourages the consumer. So I think this will, in the long run, really target on both sides.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that we all should be aware of security, and we're dealing with some international situations where security is certainly on our minds. So I certainly get why people are concerned about this. And you know what? And if you're an organization that's you have more than 50,000 people hitting your website, you could be liable to this, even though you don't make $25 million a year. So take a look at that. Make sure you are reaching out to firms that can help you make sure you're in compliance. Well, good. So the next thing we want to talk about is this. It's a really cool, kind of an obscure case that came up last year. This impacts LinkedIn, and this is an article that came out of a CPO magazine, and the author of the article was James Keenan. The name of it is What the HYeP versus LinkedIn Case Means for Automated Web Scraping. So this is specifically has to do with folks or organizations that go into LinkedIn and pull data from the users that they're connected to that is public, and they use that data for advertising. Speaking of, this is related to security. I'm going to read a little bit of this article because it does sum up some of the key things that are here. So this article, quote, it is centered around LinkedIn's invocation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in a cease and desist letter to HYeP. HYeP is a data analytics firm that provides business intelligence based on publicly available data scraped from LinkedIn. Like many businesses today, they depend on access to public-facing data to be able to function. One of the unspoken but very salient questions raised by the case is what is the line between public and private data? Where does that lie? End quote. So this is a really interesting thing because what's happening, there's lots of organizations that are doing this. They're going out there and they're scraping information right off of LinkedIn, and they're using it for marketing purposes. So here's what happened. LinkedIn sent a cease and desist letter to HYeP, and they started blocking their IP addresses, and HYeP saw this, and they did this. I'm going to read some more. Quote, HYeP decided to beat LinkedIn to the punch and filed for a preliminary injunction. Despite the earlier Power Ventures ruling, which is referenced in the article, the Ninth Circuit found that HYeP was likely to be successful in their claim that automated access to public-facing data was not in violation of the CFAA, and that's that Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that I mentioned before. So the Ninth Circuit ultimately upheld the preliminary injunction, but there's still potential for this case to come back to court, end quote. So here's the gig. This is what's important for you to know. Scraping is legal as it stands right now. So organizations that are out there that are using LinkedIn to grab data and market to people through that data that they're scraped on LinkedIn is legal. And here's what's interesting to me. I hate this. I personally don't like this. And it's funny, Eric, I should like this, right? I should like the idea that I can go out there and I market to people right on LinkedIn. But what starts to dilute the ability of LinkedIn to be a great place to connect with people that I'm interested in. What are your thoughts about this? Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I agree with you. I think I understand the purpose of data scraping, and I understand the legality of it. However, yeah, it is frustrating because, again, it goes back to that trust issue, and the consumer or the person signing up to LinkedIn, they're going to have second thoughts if they're worried about their data getting scraped and being used, again, legally, but
Right.
still being used for unrelated marketing purposes.
Now, the flip side of this, I get why they're arguing it, because if LinkedIn were to win this argument, win this legal challenge, and I do think there'll be more legal action here. It means that data that is publicly accessible on the internet could become unavailable to companies to use as marketing. So if I go out and I pop onto a website, not on LinkedIn, just on the web, and I call that company and I say, hey, I'd like to sell you my widget because it looks like you'd be interested in that, that could become illegal, and I think that's a problem. I think that the information is, sorry for that alarm, that information is important to stay public, and I should not be legally in legal peril, I should say, if I were to pop onto a website and call that company. So very interesting, I think.
Yeah, another interesting part of the article I found was how LinkedIn's point of view is because you need to have a login and a password in order to get access to information on LinkedIn. That should protect the consumer from scraping, because that is then it's private information, as they put it in the article. But
Right.
I think the HYeP's stance is that it's public because people are willingly putting it out there, and you can access some of it without the login, and that makes it public information.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Well, it's good stuff. All right. Well, anything else that we should hit before we close out here, Mr. Welch?
No, I think those are a couple of good stories there for everyone to keep an eye on.
Good stuff. Well, thank you, all of you, for listening to this our quick little news update today. Stay tuned. Every couple of weeks, we're going to drop more and more content. This is the way we keep all of you abreast of what's going on in the world of social media. So this is Mark Galvin, and for our director of social media, Eric Welch. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from each of you and visiting with all of you very soon. Have a great day.